Welcome, everyone. We're going to give just about 2 minutes to let everyone file in, and then we'll get started. But thanks so much for being here. We're going to get started. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I'm really excited for this event. The time for this program is definitely now. COVID-19 has accentuated healthcare inequities and in particular drawn our attention to the older adults among us and the care workers who, as activist Ai-jen Poo describes it, are the workers who make all other work possible. But I want to also recognize that this event didn't originate with a pandemic, actually. It started out 2 years ago in my journey and much longer in Anne's journey that she's going to tell us about tonight. But 2 years ago here at Moore College of Art and Design, where I'm the graduate program director in socially engaged art, we had a visit from Nicole Guerneau, who is a master trainer with TimeSlips Creative Storytelling, which is the organization that Basting founded. And she came to speak to my class and she talked about artists working in healthcare. And I feel like people's eyes lit up. They were excited about the possibility of, having a place to make a contribution and also make an intervention. And so kind of fast forwarding from that, I started talking to my friend Megan Voller at Jefferson Humanities and Health about collaborating on this as a way to build on all the great work that she's been doing at Jefferson on the intersection of art and health. So I just want to thank both Nicole and Megan really for planting the seed for this program. And in addition to Jefferson Humanities and Health over at Thomas Jefferson University, I also want to thank Moore's Office of Advancement, specifically Pat Ma and Liz Cahill, who secured support from the Lindback Foundation for this program and a whole series of activities that we're doing here at Moore over the course of this academic year with a number of different faculty and students involved under the umbrella called Care Crisis. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to tonight's speaker, who's Anne Basting. Basting's an artist, a scholar, an educator who's committed to the power of the arts and culture to transform our lives as individuals and communities. She's also a professor of English at the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee and is founder and president of the award-winning nonprofit TimeSlips. Basting's innovative work and community engagement as an artist and scholar has been recognized by a MacArthur Fellowship, an Ashoka Fellowship, a Rockefeller Fellowship, and multiple other major grants. She's also the author and editor of multiple books, and tonight we're celebrating the release of the latest one, which is Creative Care, released in 2020 by HarperOne. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Anne, who's going to tell us about her work with TimeSlips and other initiatives. And thanks so much for being here, Anne. When Anne's done talking, you all should put your questions in the Q&A box, and then Megan and I will do our best to field as many questions to Anne as possible for the last 20 minutes. We'll wrap up at 7 o'clock on the dot, and look forward to your engagement with Anne. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you, Daniel and Megan, and for all the folks behind the scenes who make this happen. It's a treat to be here. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Now the magic, there you go. I wanted to invite you all as well to just say, because it's always so strange to give a talk, particularly in the socially engaged sequence, where I don't know who I'm talking to. So in the chat, it might be hard for me to get a full sense of it, but I'd love for you to just say where you are at the moment, because the thing that's so great about Zoom is people can be from all over. I wanted to start out by saying I am in Milwaukee. If I threw a rock, I could maybe, if I was strong enough, get it into Lake Michigan. I am on the traditional homeland of the Potawatomi, the Ho-Chunk, the Menominee people, right along the southwest shores of Michigami, North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnick rivers all meet. And the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain vitally present. So this is the project that Nicole Garneau and I worked on together 2 years ago. It's really hard to believe sometimes that this was just spring of 2019. We worked together. You can see here in the back with the flowered hat, that fuchsia colored flowered hat and the eye patch. It was a project called I Won't Grow Up. And it was collaboration with 12 rural nursing homes across Kentucky, where together with national and regional artists and staff, residents, family, local volunteers, we reimagined the story of Peter Pan together, and together created an immersive installation theater experience at three of the 12 nursing homes to honor Wendy as she's passing away on hospice in her final days, in the last phases of growing up. It was a tremendous celebration, and hundreds of people came to the nursing home to participate. And that, to me, right now feels it's such a tremendous tragedy of a scale that I don't think we can quite imagine. We had done that work leading up to this moment and felt ourselves on a threshold of teaching skilled care settings how to not just be stigmatized health settings, but to be cultural institutions. When lockdown happened, nothing could happen there except infection control, isolation. People weren't even allowed to have meals together. People were in their rooms, separated from family. The porous boundaries of those facilities that we worked so hard to create just completely became rigid, and it was impossible for us to get in. 36% of the deaths in COVID have been in long-term care settings, and long-term care settings have just 1% of the population overall. So that gives you a sense of the scale of this. The loneliness and isolation, and the lack of purpose and meaning, the lack of understanding why my health is being preserved. There's no purpose for my life if I'm just isolated and separated from family, particularly in care settings where dementia is a reality. Up to, some nursing homes, up to 75% of people who have a really difficult time even comprehending the daily reality of a pandemic. We really are staring into the face of ageism and ableism right now. We are seeing racial inequities in access to healthcare. And we have to sit on this moment where vaccines are starting to have an impact in long-term care, to see forward into what's possible and to learn our lesson as to how the system was completely messed up and broken before, which I think I Won't Grow Up started to work on, but also what's our role as artists from here in the care setting structure, but also upstream from that. What is our role? What can we do? Here's just a shot from David Ryder, the photographer with Reuters, that just shows you a little bit of the price. I'm sure a lot of you saw these photographs of just the pain of people trying to connect through windows. And I know the TimeSlips team did a lot of webinars on creative ways to connect through isolation, but I would get these painful emails from people or calls from people saying, my mother lives on the 4th floor. I can't do that. How can I do this? It's just a tremendously painful experience. So going back a little bit, just to say that the bulk of my work in infusing creativity in the arts into care settings has been about bringing opportunities for meaning making to people. And I really have come to describe it that way, that we really should have meaning making opportunities from the beginning when we show up in this world all the way to the end. And the way that I've structured that with TimeSlips is, and offering training through them, is through what we call creative engagement. And artists have a special capacity for this, but everyone has this skill set. It is an innate human capacity. So it's a real positioned as a collaborative tool that can be taught to staff, but also then done in collaboration with artists. It rests on a base of improvisation, of what I've come to call beautiful questions, which are questions that open a shared path of discovery that have no right or wrong. They are offering proof of listening, which is a radical affirmation and demonstration of that affirmation of choices. Rigor and value, which is putting social capital, commitment of time or money, if that's possible, into the products so that people know they're participating in something valued. And then connecting individual, in order to demonstrate an individual and a communal purpose. It makes a difference other than just to the single person involved. So the question that I became haunted with after many, many years of doing individual kind of improvisational storytelling sessions and teaching this skill set to people was really, and it's really a question now because we clearly need meaning making at scale. Is that possible? Is it possible to do this at scale? And should we try? Should we really try? Or is it a micro benefit? So the first effort that I made at this scale was to infuse creative engagement into an entire long-term care facility, community, I should say, independent living, assisted living, skilled care, and then adult day. Together over a year in collaboration with Sojourn Theater, we reimagined the story of Homer's Odyssey and then staged a play site-specifically through the care community. And this is a professional actor playing the old beggar who's demonstrating that he actually is Odysseus returned, and Caroline Imhoff from Assisted Living at Luther Manor playing Athena. Just a really beautiful experience that there's a book and there's a documentary if you want to learn more. But that was one care community. So it worked. We did a lot of research on it. It was great. But could it be really infused? What we have to do is really get it to scale, like really get it into whole health systems and social service systems. And in that situation, what is the role of the artist? Where and how many artists do you need? What is the threshold? This is really envisioning art as water, the quest for sustainable meaning making, to pour these opportunities into these systems themselves, and a community, to dream of a community in which creativity is fully infused into care practices. And that's really my dream inside of creative care, is positioning it as a merger for creativity and care practices. So this is a project that I did. I'm going to do a little bit of a case study of a project that I did now it's way back in 2012 through 14, which when I think about it was really prescient to see if we could bring creative engagement to people older adults living alone who were under-resourced, might have had difficulty getting to senior centers or we studied the systems that were in place to reach them. And so these are kind of the key guidelines that I have here for that process. And I'm going to walk us through that a little bit and then carry us forward from that to how suddenly in lockdown, we said, we know how to do this. We have the report, we have the whole project, and we've been spinning it out since then. So the first step is really studying that system. That system is your canvas. It is, if you're in theater, it is your dramaturgy. It's your story that you can build on. And as you're studying it, you're looking at, I follow and teach asset-based community development. So we map all of the creative assets, the people who can be leaders, their skills, and all the physical resources, and even IT resources that can be mobilized in order to bring creative engagement out, to build little feedback loops, to have a prompt, to get responses, small loops building to a bigger culminating project. They are living and breathing structures, constantly responding, constantly asking those beautiful questions and offering proof of listening, monitoring and adjusting with all the partners all the way along the way. It is at its base, the refusal at every moment to separate health and culture. Our systems have a residue from the institutionalization of medicine and the institutionalization of arts as separate entities from the 1800s. And we're slowly getting to a place where I think we can now start refusing that separation. For people who work in the health system, you should constantly be asking yourself, are there opportunities for meaning making here? Why not? How could we do that? And in cultural settings, are we attentive to wellness issues here? Why not? Accessibility for people from all different ranges of health and abilities. Find beauty and wonder at every moment, and I'll share some of those. And then never stop inviting people. When this funny thing happens when we shifted away from working in long-term care settings, long-term care settings have a built-in infrastructure called programming and activities. And so people had the expectation that activities were going to happen. When you leave that and you start trying to get out into people living in just their homes or apartments in the regular community, people can say no, and they should say no. There isn't that built-in infrastructure to invite people to programming and activities. But you just always invite, constantly invite. We were doing that in healthcare setting, like in long-term care settings as well, because people thought they couldn't do it. People have had their own creative capacity doubted for so long and kind of shut down that it takes a long period of time to awaken them to it again, to just a constant inviting process. This is just a little short illustration of the process, which is a phase of research and partnership building, a phase of creative generation where there's a series of very simple requests that then can build to more complex involvement, a refinement period where you're shaping that larger culminating event, and then evaluation and exit. And the consideration for that phase should be always part of the overall arching plan. And that's also an acknowledgement that maybe the artist's role doesn't always continue, or maybe it transforms after this process gets set. Here's where we started. I remember very clearly in my early days, I was actually doing my dissertation and I interviewed Suzanne Lacey, and I was writing about Whisper the Waves, the Wind, and the Crystal Quilt, a couple of her projects with older adults. And I said, was it frustrating for you in that long period of meetings to feel your vision be kind of mutating in the course of those meetings? And she said, no, you don't get it. The meetings are the art. You don't have the art in mind. and then you have meetings. The meetings are the art. So look at everything in a meeting as your materials. I mean, you see the pens on the table, the quality of the paper, the people around the table, the room in which you're going to appear, the refreshments, everything is part of that process. And here you see 4 members of Sojourn Theater who were involved in Islands of Milwaukee. And also the range of people that you want to be part of the input of your core group. And this picture has a home caregiver whose husband had dementia, the paid caregiver staff next to her, one of the deputy director of the County Department on Aging, and then a student intern. So if you're doing a radical democratic process, to make sure you have a wide range of people at the table is part, I think, of the responsibility of the art making. So we studied the Meals on Wheels system for this. We did ride-alongs. We looked at the timing and how much time, and could we infuse meaning making into that micro process? How could we create a feedback loop? What could be the invitation to creativity? How could we bring it back? How could we build on it and then share it back with the people, the participants, so they knew they were part of something bigger? That was part of our process. We learned an incredible amount. What we decided to do was not reference art at all, because the baggage and the resistance to creativity and art making was so tremendous that we decided to just say our invitation to participate was, I have a question of the day. Would you like to hear it? And then get the participants into a rhythm of that question showing up every week. And the designer from Sojourn, Shannon Scrofano, designed these little cards that could go with the meal. And then we also distributed those to people who were doing phone well checks through the telephone reassurance system. And we also trained home care workers in the beautiful question, or the question of the day, which was really question of the week. And we created the feedback loop so that people could handwrite on the back, on the card, on the front or the back, or call an 800 number. And we had a voicemail that we could automatically transcribe and record all of their responses. So we got 45 questions of the day that were all worded kind of poetically. Some were very practical and would be gathering what we call data of longing for the County Department on Aging, and yet also inviting expression of strength, inviting people to reimagine their space differently, because these are people who mainly don't leave their homes, again, very prescient to pandemic, and also to explore their senses. So those were the ways that we phrased those. If you could go anywhere in Milwaukee right now, where would you go? Was actually a practical question, because the county department and some of the nonprofits supporting rides for people would only offer rides to get food or to doctor's appointments. And the data of longing there were places that they actually really wanted to go, but couldn't go. And that was really informative. And we wrote all of those out. One of the questions was, where do you connect to nature? We mapped all of those out and gave that back to the county, which runs the county park system. Again, drawing on strength. So you see here, what is something you could teach another person? Not to gossip, to care for the elderly, and to give your troubles to Jesus. Another practical question that we asked was, is there an intersection you wish you could cross on foot but feel it is too dangerous? And that yielded, we were shocked, 500 different intersections. We mapped all of those and gave that to the city and the county as well, because this was not any data that showed up on all of their data about how to redo intersections or make sign changes was from crash data. this was data where people had given up even trying to cross. So this was data of longing. If someone called and responded to a beautiful question, question of the week, and they left their name and phone number, we took that as a sign that they wanted they wanted communication. So we had a couple graduate assistants who would call back and say, thank you so much for that beautiful answer. Would you ever want an artistic house call? So we had maybe about a couple dozen people out of the 2,500 responses that we got that asked for more. And we followed up with home visits with artists. This is a picture of one where we had gone back to do an artistic house call with a gentleman, with Jim, who was beyond language. We asked him the question, can you show me how water moves? And I actually tell that whole story in a TED Med talk that you can see the video of. But this was an image of us coming back and showing a dance that the Sojourn folks had created in response to his choreography. And we shared it and then danced with his wife, Fran, in the garden that Jim had planted. And in the middle of it, a neighbor came over who had also, Fran had invited her, Antoinette, because she was very isolated and going through cancer treatments. And she simply, in the middle of this dance, walked into the yard and held up her hand. And James silently went over and included her in the dance. It's quite beautiful. The whole culminating event there was about, we decided that we really wanted these older adults who were getting Meals on Wheels delivery, which is for people who are low income, who were getting telephone reassurance calls, people who are the forgotten layer of older adults. We wanted to assert their value as citizens. So we decided that the best place for an exhibit would be Milwaukee's City Hall. Milwaukee City Hall is stunningly beautiful. It's an 8-floor atrium with beautiful, intricate metal railings around each of the floors. We created, Shannon Scrofano and Maureen Towie from Sojourn really worked to create an installation that had interactive question stations, so we could exhibit the cards with the handwriting that came back, as well as invite people who attended the exhibit to write their own answer and add it. You can see these little clothespins, and she's actually adding her own response there. Here you can see there were 6 different interactive question stations, and each one of them featured a story of a particular person that we engaged through an artistic house call or kind of a special story, one of those questions that was particularly powerful for that person. This one was Ernest's story. He called in maybe about halfway through the Beautiful Question series, where there were about 45 of them. And he left a voicemail saying, my volunteer who calls me, we both thought these questions were kind of stupid. And then this week she asked me, what is your safe harbor? And I thought, that's not a stupid question at all. And I said, that's my church. And she said, you know what, that's mine too. And so now I'd like to answer all the other questions. So he left this incredibly long voicemail that was all of the previous questions that he had kept and was now answering. So we told that story of Ernest and invited people to share their own responses. This gives you a little bit of an idea. You can see the ground floor. We literally created an island that was cut across in cross section. And there were audio installation sections where you could pick up a DJ headphone. Rather, we tested it out. People didn't want to put on headphones. So we just held a sound stick, a padded sound stick. And you could hear audio from all the calls and then some of the artistic house calls as well. We worked with a sound designer who kind of created a bed for those. And then we created a newspaper from the islands of Milwaukee that really was the program for the show. And you can see up above a little bit of that atrium and some of the installation stations up there. Here's 2 shots just from above to give you a sense of that. My job, we also created a performance. We did this in conjunction with Doors Open Milwaukee. I'm not sure if there's a similar thing in Philly where for a weekend, all these different buildings are open. It's pandemic, we can't imagine it again, but City Hall was open for Doors Open. And so we had quite a few people coming through just for that who happened upon the exhibit. And we did a performance to activate and open the exhibit. And my job was to go up to the top floor here and to dump over at the end of the performance a box of those individual questions, and they fluttered down like snowflakes. But I tell you, I was nauseous every single time I did it. Here's an overhead of the performance piece itself. We performed on little step stools with megaphones because you couldn't really do microphones. There was so many barriers, and by selecting this as a performance space, but it was also there were incredible opportunities. So here they were performing the dance. You can see the driftwood, which is what Jim performed with, that we did in the garden. We translated it to this setting, and they were performing that as well. I wanted to share the audio here of just one of the sound stations. It was kind of an overview of, there's actually kind of a little tunnel in here with a clear chair, a plexiglass chair, and you can hear this.
Chickens or roosters. What if I go to do anything today in Milwaukee, I would go out there. I would go to Golden Corral. I'm still I don't give up. I was in Milwaukee. I was in Milwaukee.
Learn to accept yourself, first of all. If you want to accept anyone else, if you want to accept someone else, first of all, accept yourself. Charity begins right at home inside of you, man, okay? That's where it begins, all right? And then the rest of them go to hell. Literally. I thought that made you laugh. I meant to laugh is good for the soul. Mm-hmm. Think about this. When you laugh, you think about nothing positive or negative. You just feel wonderful. When you laugh, that's good for the soul. When you laugh like that, all you I got to pay this bill tomorrow. Okay.
So just a little hint, that gentleman was a quadriplegic who we visited in a home artistic house call. We also had another sound station that I write a chapter in Creative Care about my encounter with Bill, who had tremendous difficulty with speaking, but he could sing just beautifully. And so we recorded him singing. We actually wrote an original song, but that's not, it was an adaptation of Rock of Ages. But that's not what's featured here. It's him singing another song. And then Ellie was a volunteer with a home visit and a telephone reassurance program, a well check program. And through our creative asset mapping, we learned that she had taught voice lessons. So we asked her if she would listen to a recording of Bill's singing and then layer in harmony. And we shared that with a sound designer who created, whoop, I'm gonna go back, hang on. Sorry. Oh no.
All right.
Oh, the Lord took a rib from Adam's side. He made a woman, and the woman she died. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, May, don't weep. Oh, maid, don't you weep, don't you moan. Maid, don't you weep round the cornerstone. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, maid, don't weep. That's the end of the first one.
Okay, what's the other one?
I get to put 2 in?
Yeah, you get to put 2 in.
Then we're going to go. If you miss the train I'm on, you will know that I am gone. You can hear the whistle blow 100 miles, 100 miles, 100 miles, 100 miles, 100 miles. You can hear the whistle blow 100 miles.
Let's play a little
Oh,
bit.
the Lord took a rib from Adam's side. He made a woman, and the woman she died. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, maid, don't weep. Oh, maid, don't you weep, don't you moan. Maid, don't you weep round the cornerstone. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, maid, don't weep.
So Bill could not join us at the performance, but his family did, and Ellie did as well. So that's just a little taste of it. The good news is I'm just now applying for a grant and in collaboration with the Milwaukee Public Library, which is going to archive that whole project and the project that I'll tell you about shortly, which is on its heels happening again right now. I just wanted to give you a few more pictures of the I Won't Grow Up project. This is one of the performances in Lee County, which is a very rural Appalachian nursing home. And here you see staff. The woman in the middle here is the director of nursing who wrote an original song for the performance. The quality of life director, somebody's baby who's dressed like a fairy. I don't know whose it is. A resident who wanted to be a pirate. So Jimmy is the king of the pirates. And one of the staff members made that jacket. Just the amount of creative capacity was stunning. Also at this site, there was a mandolin player, a fiddle player. I mean, it was amazing. That's the photo from that same production with Bob Martin, who was the director of the performances and also played the crocodile in 2 of the 3 performances. Nicole played the 3rd one. Jeff Becker was the set designer. And there's Bob playing the crocodile and the resident playing, whose name escapes me, who's playing Wendy. In the final scene, where they celebrate finally being able to fly away, and the whole place, demonstration of belief, not in fairies, but in each other and the elders, and inviting the audience to believe in the elders. And the final scene where everyone sings I'll Fly Away with live bluegrass music and choreography by the elders themselves. We had a professional choreographer out of Chicago's deeply rooted dance theater, Kevin Iega Jeff, who was just amazing. It was a great team. The project with Islands of Milwaukee, again, it was the second lockdown happened. We're like, we know how to do this. We've been through the systems. We know how they work. We know where we can incorporate creative engagement. We were working at that time with the city of Durham to do an initiative in collaboration with Dementia Inclusive Durham, which is a cross-sector partnership to make Durham a supportive community for living with dementia. The challenges were lockdown. They were trying specifically to reach people living alone with dementia, a very vulnerable population, and adults with dementia with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So you had limited tech access and limited funds, but we had that incredible network. We knew we could do phone capacity and access by phone and a Zoom platform. We had some caregivers to help, and we had a team of local and national artists. And we ended up doing first a series of weekly half-an-hour creative workshops by Zoom, accessible by phone, all starting with a beautiful question, artist-led, that created little poems or movements or things in the course of that half an hour. And now we are infusing the beautiful questions out through 7 community partnerships systems, gathering them back, collaborating with, we just put out a call for a composer arranger to create an original piece out of the beautiful question responses for the Durham Children's Choir, which will be an interactive performance in the spring of 2022, assuming that is when we can all gather again. And then we did this in Milwaukee. We hired 10 artists who were all, of course, artists were mostly out of work back in June. And we trained them in what we had been piloting for several years at that point, which was a phone-based half-an-hour story exchange process. We partnered with ERIS, which was a senior network here in Milwaukee, which used to be Interfaith, which was the organization we collaborated with in Islands of Milwaukee, and to identify 100 elders. So each artist talked with 10 elders for a half an hour for 12 weeks. And then at the end of it, they created co-created a product of some sort, that culminating event. One of the artists, Brenna, created a Recipes for Living book where each of the 10 people she talked with literally gave her a recipe that she made and photographed herself making, but then also they talked about recipes for good living. So she shared that in a book form. And then I just wanted to play you this really briefly, which was a really beautiful animation that Stephen Dixon did from his exchange with Emma.
Mm-hmm. Why?
First, I was in there for congestive heart failure.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time I was in there, I fell here and broke my feet. I broke my foot in here. Getting to the door to open the door for the guy gonna go do my grocery shopping for me.
Mm-hmm.
And when he comes, I crawled over there to the door. And when he come in, I said, I think I done broke my foot. He said, oh, no. He picked me up and put me in the wheelchair. And he called, the aide who sent my aide out. And he told him to get me to the hospital. And he said, you won't go.
Mm-hmm. Why not? Why wouldn't you go?
Because I'm sitting up there taking my foot. And I guess you think I was stupid. Taking my foot, trying to push the bone back down in my He said, what's wrong? I said, put me in the bed. He put me in the bed and he gave me the key. Oh, they didn't want, I had to call them, push the lifeline, get paramedics in. And they said, you're a good woman. They got me to the hospital. And the doctor put me, told me the same thing paramedic told me. He said, you a good woman. They put me to sleep, and next thing I know, they done put a pin in my foot, And they just put a cast on my leg.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when they put me in the nursing home. I was in there
Oh, here, I'm gonna forward just for time's sake. We have a whole webinar on the TimeSlips resource page that you can watch about the whole Telestories project. It's just a video that you can watch for free on that page. I wanted to take a second because those are mammoth projects, and there's also something for, I think we are gearing up to crack the nut of scale. And I think, again, I am about refusing this separation. So joining systems of meaning making together with social service systems, but you can also do this on a micro scale. Just sending a postcard with a beautiful question to an individual person, forming an individual relationship and framing it as an arts process. Here's just an example of a friend of mine who TimeSlips, actually I'll forward and then come back, curated a list, and it's still on the website, curated a list of 150 nursing homes across the world that had asked for cards. And so my friend invited Story through just a series of old vintage postcards. This looks like a place where there were plenty of adventures, sword fights, a vial of love potion, a monster in the lake who has a pure heart. What do you think happened here? And then inviting responses and shaping something together. I actually got to a point, I was writing hundreds of postcards, and then I thought, I'm gonna pick one place and I'm gonna write a series of cards as though I'm a character in a story. So I ended up writing and drawing 22 different cards as though I was Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. It was a little crazy, but it was also tremendous fun. So this is the question. What if at this moment, when we're staring at unbelievable disparities and ageism and ableism that has been really revealed in our culture, what if we had opportunities for meaning making all the way to the end of life? And what if we could prescribe that like we prescribe pills in our pill happy healthcare system? What if other countries have it? It's called social prescribing. How can we do that here? So thank you all. I turn it back over to Daniel and Megan for questions.
Anne, thank you so much. Whenever I hear you give a talk, I always think that I want to live in the world that your work is working to bring into being. I love that place. I love sort of hearing it conjured. So thank you for that. I wanted to start by asking you again, I love some of the language that you've developed for these ideas. Some things that you said that jumped out to me include the refusal to separate health and culture, and also the idea of addressing the stigma around long-term care settings by turning them into cultural institutions. I mean, these are ideas that I just love so much. And so I wanted to ask if you would indulge me in this, are there specific things that you would recommend that we look at doing institutionally or funding wise? We're in an economic moment where people are calling for like a WPA style response to the pandemic. And if we were envisioning something like that, if you were in charge in Washington, what should we do? Should the NEA be fused with the NIH somehow? What should we put artists to work in long-term care facilities and all kinds of care facilities and clinical settings? What are the kinds of things we should do?
Yes. I think every community health center should have an artist. I don't want to say artist in residence, but because I think that model brings with it a different kind of a thing that we need to reinvent a little bit. But essentially, that's kind of it, that there should be an artist who is a liaison to other cultural opportunities in that community, who can facilitate the integration of them into systems that are reaching people at home and then also into congregate settings. I think I think schools, service learning, we need to really address reciprocal models of engagement intergenerationally. That one of the things we really learned is that a lot of the models for service learning are about extraction of story, not about real genuine engagement. And when we do that, when they're reciprocal creative engagement projects, what you're doing is reducing the stigma of aging for that young person. So that one of the really incredible research data points I've learned is that there's a study that shows if you internalize negative attitudes about aging, you yourself lose 7.5 years off your life. So we're doing a tremendous disservice to the older person that's within us if we don't wrestle with the ageism ourselves and ableism ourselves. It breeds resilience. So as much of work as we have to do with white privilege and racial inequities, we have to do the same work with aging and ableism as well. I think too that we need to find ways to incentivize. Our whole health system has to think about ways to incentivize well-being as a measure, so that the investment of resources is so clear. There's enough research now that we really know that these things work for improving well-being, but it's just not incentivized. Another little fantasy thing I have is that every NIH grant, every medical research, every effort to find a pill, all of those research studies should have artists attached to them. That should be required, artists or humanities, either one, so that those funding streams get integrated. And that in training programs, artists are trained. And I really respect Liz Lerman's work in this way. She's done a lot of this bridge work with the sciences, that artists are taught to communicate in health and science. So that's a language that they speak, and those are systems that they can use as canvases as well.
Thanks so much, Anne. I'm going to do my best to field a bunch of questions that are coming in, and two of them are kind of similar. I mean, they have to do with sharing back out your findings, and so one is sort of focused more on kind of this question used, the phrasing of how to keep the forgotten layer of citizens connected once the creative engagement projects are complete. And then also a question about sharing out the data with care teams, if you think about the data that sort of is being drawn from your collection process.
Those are great. Those are the feedback loops. And I'm like an addict for feedback loops. I love conceptualizing them. It's kind of a weird, nerdy thing. The current iteration is a good example of these feedback loops. So we're right now, literally, I have little bags of the questions in just outside this door here. We're collaborating again with Meals on Wheels and the whole county division of aging, the Division on Aging. And they are inviting their subcontractors to an open house creative conversation on Zoom to learn about the training that we can provide about how to use the beautiful questions, and telling us their feedback loop system that they can offer. So what are the things that go back out? How could we print the questions on the menu that goes out with Meals on Wheels? What are those things that you could integrate the art into that pre-exist? Because these are systems in strife and strain, and adding something new to them, they'll collapse. So you want to build on what they're already doing and infuse the artistic product and in the return process back out to them. The other thing is to ask about what to me, radio is the most accessible, and what radio stations, this is one of my questions for our open house, are the most popular, and what shows. so that it might be a certain DJ in a certain neighborhood radio station that we're going to have a conversation with and invite to play the audio piece that we're going to create. It might be the morning Fox News, local Fox News television, and we'll ask them. So we're defining our feedback loop from the participating partners themselves, if that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Anne. And we got a question from one of our faculty, Blake Bradford, who says that you cited what might have been your anticipation of a threshold fear over your first engagement being an art question or proposing a creative home visit. What might this project have told you about people's perception of an art experience?
It came very clearly, very early in the feedback loops with the interfaith volunteers who were talking to the elders that they worked with, and they were pitching it as an arts and craft project. And we're like, and nobody wanted to do it. And we thought, okay, how can we change that so that it's not art first, we see it as art, but it can be something in between what they understand and what we understand. And that was really how we came up with, I have a question of the day, do you want to hear it? Because almost everyone said yes. Of course, yeah, I want to hear, yeah, sure. I don't have to answer, but I want to hear it. And then you're one step into the engagement process that way. I have an art project. Do you want to hear it? No. That was really what we were running into. And I think it is just the weight of the professionalization of the arts, that people think art and they think museum and symphony. They don't think my human capacity to imagine. It's not what they're thinking when they hear those words.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. I mean, maybe, we got several questions that were really about people launching this, projects and taking inspiration from your work. Some folks in therapeutic recreation, some folks working with folks with dementia, and in other kind of settings. And so, I sent out the chat or your resource page on TimeSlips, but I don't know if there's other ways that you want people who are trying to develop this work, you want to invite them into your process at all.
Sure, yeah, info@timeslips.org. And the amazing thing to me, which I just, it baffles me and I'm so enormously happy and proud, is that there's a whole team of people to respond to your questions, and there's 927 certified facilitators now across the world, which is just fantastic. So to me, it's really, that's part of the network, helping each other in conversation, in idea sharing, and getting this work out more broadly is part of the joy of this. So info@timeslips.org. There's a whole certified facilitator Facebook page if you're one of those, or it's easy enough to become one.
Thanks so much, Anne. This has been a real treat to get to have a sense of your practice. And again, even though this was envisioned as a kind of a pre-pandemic event, I'm so grateful for the way in which you've been able to, glean lessons from your archive and think about what it can offer practitioners today. I also want to make a quick plug for some of our upcoming events that are also happening around this theme of care crisis. So we have Moore's latest Walintas Fellow, Alicia Grulon, in dialogue with Laura Reykjavich. They're going to be talking about a lot of Alicia's work around care and essential work. And then the folks from the Creative Resilience Collective here in Philadelphia are going to be joining the galleries at Moore for a dialogue about collective care. So I hope that you all join us for those activities, and please just keep in touch, follow TimeSlips, and follow what Megan is doing at Jefferson Humanities and Health, and keep in touch with us about the socially engaged art graduate programs here at Moore. And thanks so much, Anne, for your time.
It was a treat. Thank you.